Kids in cages. Kids in cages. I remember that, don't you, during the Trump administration? Anytime you wanted to talk about immigration, anytime you had a conversation with a Democrat, they would bleat that like sheep. Kids in cages. I had one scream in my face on the Bill Maher show, the former governor of Michigan. I'll never forget, screaming at kids in cages. I wasn't even talking about detention and migrant facilities or anything like that, but we were talking about immigration more broadly, and that was the only line that had to be said. So that's their approach. They come up with a slogan, they all shout the slogan, and they think that they've made a really important point. And if you disagree, you're a bad person. Here's the problem with brainless slogans. They generally don't hold up very well. Now, I know the Democrats are only interested in short-term political gain. They have no interest whatsoever in actually looking at the long-term, real-world effects of pretty much all of their policies. But on immigration, we're starting to see exactly where this party is trying to take us. And I want everyone to be very clear. There's the AOC wing, and then there's the Biden pseudo-Democrat moderates, right? But they're trying to take us to the same place. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is trying to get us to go to a place that Joe Biden will take us to as well. It's just she's more honest about it. She's like, let's just stop the pretense. We're Democrats. We don't want border security. We want open borders. Let's go for it. And so that's why this is something we all have to pay attention to. But that was the single biggest moral victory the Democrats claimed really in the first 2 years of the Trump presidency was the constant media analysis and all the news stories about how Trump was running detention camps for children. He's evil. Well, the problem is that now there are unaccompanied minors who crossed the border illegally who are also being held in a facility that was considered a kids in cages facility. Now, I know what Democrats are going to do. They're going to say, well, now the facilities have, more soccer balls and pillows and, more access to TVs or PlayStations or something. They're going to say they're nicer and act like that's a big difference. But I remember that when this initially happened and Trump was in office, they were comparing these facilities to concentration camps. In fact, AOC herself used that term, concentration camps at the border. That's what they said. My former boss, CIA Director Mike Hayden, who apparently lost his mind when he was no longer in charge of the CIA or just showed everybody that he's a big liberal, big lib. He also referred to the concentration camps at our southern border. So this was something that the left was very energized and upset about and was using to bludgeon Trump and his supporters in every opportunity over the immigration issue. Because there was a crisis going on. Here's what was really happening. As a little bit of review for the folks at home, the surge of migrants to our southern border was the exploitation of a loophole by people predominantly, but not entirely, from Central America who were crossing through Mexico to the U.S. border, pretending that they were fleeing violence when really they just wanted to be in a better country than Honduras or Guatemala, better economic climate, just better in every quality of life measure. And so they said, well, I'm fleeing violence. They had been coached, and they knew that once they got into the United States by claiming secondary asylum after crossing the border illegally, they would not have to show up for their hearing, and then they'd be in the U.S., and they'd be good to go. That was what hundreds of thousands of them did. Now, I remember when Democrats had to try to defend this because it was just a giant de facto open door policy at our border, what they kept saying was, oh, they'll show up. Well, obviously they weren't going to show up, and most of them didn't. And the ones who did show up then also had the option for their asylum hearing, then had the option of not showing up to their deportation hearing, which is a whole different hearing at a later date. But it was useful to Democrats to play dumb on this issue. They acted like, well, we really believe that people are going to show up. We really believe that they're going to keep their word and obey the law. This is all about the legality or illegality of these things. And, of course, that didn't happen. But they focused on Trump and kids in cages because they didn't want the American people to say, hold on a second, why are Democrats in favor of people scamming our system to get to the front of the immigration line? Why do they advocate in favor of this all the time? Well, we know Democrats want people who come into the country illegally to be able to stay because it increases their political power and increases the size of Democrat-controlled population centers, which then also, as we know now, factors into the census, and it increases their power politically when they make people citizens, which they're trying to do right now, who will then vote for Democrats. So this is just a system for the manufacturing of Democrat votes. It's not because they care so much about the left. About the poor, the left, the poor and the underserved. It's not because they have some soft spot for everyone from all over the world. I mean, they have a soft spot as long as it's your money that is going, your tax dollars going to support it, your neighborhood school that is going to have more English as a second language classes. You're going to have to deal with more people who are arriving who will need a greater degree of financial assistance because illegal immigrants, and they always try to conflate these things, do require, on average, more state services, do require more assistance to be in the actual marketplace and be in the employment sector. So that's the way this shakes out, and yet here we are, all over again. Now they've got Biden doing exactly the same thing. They'll say it's so different. It's really not. He's got unaccompanied teenagers who are being held, so they're being detained. So what's supposed to happen? We're going to do what? And I want you to be clear on this as well. They're sending, meaning there are people, adults, who are sending their unaccompanied teens across the border, right? And there's a whole Democrat plan here, too, where they want to reunite people that were deported during the Trump years. So if you were deported, but you send your kid back over the border, then you know what ends up happening? You've got this great new tether to the United States. You've got this connection, this anchor, if you will, inside the U.S. And this is the game. This is the whole plan. They get 11 million plus. And I know the number is bigger than 11 million, but I don't know what the number is. I don't believe anybody knows the true number. They've got at least 11 million. And they think that they'll be able to get to full legalization and citizenship for all of them. And then, by the way, all this stuff you're hearing about, oh, Buck, we're going to fix mail-in ballots. We're going to fix, we're going to fight on the, well, if they add a few million voters to the rolls who are going to 3-1 vote Democrat, we got bigger problems even than mail-in ballot shenanigans. We got structural political issues that we face. And that's look at how Democrats, you almost got to respect it. I mean, it's ruthless. It's pulling the country apart at the seams. It's lawless. But Democrats, when they're in charge, man, they go for it. What did we do for all the bluster, for all the talk from the GOP and, yes, from Trump? For the first 2 years, we need a majority in the House and the Senate. What did we do? Tax cuts. Yeah, that tax cut. We heard a lot about it. I don't think anybody really believes that was quite as worthy of celebration as we may have thought at the time. So here we are now. This is a structural, long-term political issue. This really does affect the future of the country. And Democrats will cover for Biden on this. But it also is illuminating in many ways to see that their idea here is to just make sure that this is as emotional an issue as possible and that people don't understand what's really going on and the way that people are gaming the system. There are a lot of legal immigrants. There are a lot of legal immigrants who listen to this show and who write into me, who say, I spent years, I did it the right way. I had to pay, immigration attorneys. I had to go through the visa process. I had to get my green card. I had to do all these things. And apparently I could have, sent my 15-year-old across the border, which is reckless, by the way, because you're sending somebody across cartel-controlled territory. You're sending a minor. I mean, this is the whole other thing. This is not good. This behavior that's going on here, it's putting children at risk. Adults are putting children at risk, and the U.S. is scooping them up and saying, okay, well, we're going to feed you and protect you and take care of you while we figure out what we're supposed to do here. But, you know, we weren't able to have an adult discussion about this before. It was kids in cages. That's all they wanted to say. Well, what are they saying now? Obviously very different things because it's a Democrat in charge. Remember this, though. Pointing out their hypocrisy doesn't do anything. They are hypocrites, and they know it. They don't care. They're in power. What their move now is to ignore what they said before and just see what they can get away with, what they can rub the Republican side of the country's face in right now. That's what they're trying to do. What can they use as a major power play here on the immigration issue? That's all that's on their minds. They do not care about consistency. They do not care about the rule of law. And they certainly don't care that, yeah, fine, maybe now Biden's got kids in cages too, but he's Joe Biden and AOC is trying to get an open door policy at our southern border. So, you know, what can you do? Let's just get what we want done as Democrats. That's their approach. Obviously, we want to try to thwart this, but there's also something to learn from them here. Hey, Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.